I will end you. I will hunt you down and bring you endless torture. Will you please stop smiling? This is important. Modern Queen Tales presents Broken Stagehand and Fallen Star. The wedding dress hung heavy with drying pig's blood. My combat boots squeaked against the polished linoleum of the apartment hallway. I adjusted the ceramic kabuki mask over my face. The painted red smile pressed cold against my mouth. The eye holes scratched the skin over my cheekbones. I tightened my right hand around the handle of a 10-inch steel chef's knife. I stood before apartment 4B. Inside lived Kaora and Genki. I planned to kill the newlywed wife, Kaora, and kidnap the husband, Genki. I harbored a deep, consuming crush on Genki. I intended to drag him down the hall to my apartment, lock him away, and brainwash him into returning my affections. I retrieved my lockpicking set from the pocket hidden in the folds of my ruined skirt. I slid the tension wrench into the bottom of the keyway. I raked the pins with the hook pick. The cylinder turned with a sharp click. I pushed the door open. The apartment smelled of plastic cement, acrylic paint, and instant ramen. The living room held cardboard boxes stacked in the corners. A folding table occupied the center of the space. A man sat at the table. He wore gray sweatpants and a faded black t-shirt. His messy dark hair fell over his forehead. He held a pair of steel tweezers. He carefully attached a microscopic plastic machine gun to the deck of a miniature battleship. I stepped inside. I let the door click shut behind me. I raised the knife. I took a heavy, squeaking step forward. The man glanced up. He looked at my blood-soaked dress. He looked at my demonic mask. He looked at the massive knife. His expression remained entirely blank. His eyes held the dull glaze of a man waiting in line at the DMV. "Pass the glue, please," he said. He pointed his tweezers at a wire shelving unit behind my left shoulder. I froze. My brain processed his words. I turned my head. A glass bottle of Tamiya extra thin cement sat on the second shelf. I turned back to him. I gripped the knife tighter. My knuckles turned white. "Where are they?" I demanded. My voice echoed hollowly behind the ceramic mask. "Where are Kaoru and Genki?" The man set his tweezers down. He picked up a tiny plastic radar dish with his fingers. They decided to go on their honeymoon ahead of time. Hawaii. Or maybe Okinawa. I forget. He blew a speck of dust off the radar dish. I am keeping an eye on the place in the meantime. The glue? Frustration boiled in my stomach. My target escaped me. My perfect plan evaporated. But a sharper, hotter anger pierced through my disappointment. This man displayed absolutely zero fear. I wore a blood-drenched wedding gown and brandished a lethal weapon. He asked me for crafting supplies. "I am going to cut your throat." I stepped forward. I brought the tip of the knife inches from his face. "I am going to slice your jugular and watch you bleed out on your stupid little toy boat." He sighed. He leaned back in his folding chair. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Are you going to fetch the glue or just stand there dripping on the floorboards? The blood is flaking off your hem. Do you understand what I am?" "A quirky neighbor," he answered. "Quirky?" I leaned closer. I pressed the flat of the blade against his cheek. "I am a predator. The spare room in my apartment down the hall is a fully functional dungeon." I installed soundproofing foam. I bolted steel chains to the concrete floor. I have a reinforced steel door with a deadbolt on the outside. I lock people away. His eyebrows twitched upward. He looked at my eyes through the slits in my mask. "A dungeon?" "A dungeon," I confirmed. I pressed the blade harder against his skin. "Show me," he said. I blinked. "What?" He reached to his right. He tapped the trackpad of an open laptop sitting next to his modeling mat. The screen woke up. He turned the screen toward me. The screen displayed a grid of security camera feeds. One feed showed the hallway. I watched a replay of myself, in my bloody dress, picking the lock to apartment 4B. "I tapped the building's security system an hour ago," he explained. His voice maintained a flat, monotonous drawl. "I have you on tape breaking and entering with a deadly weapon. Show me the dungeon, or I hit send on an email to the local police precinct." I gritted my teeth. I lowered the knife. "Fine, follow me." I turned on my heel. I marched out of his apartment. I heard his chair scrape against the floor. He followed me down the hall. We walked to apartment 4A. I unlocked my door. I led him through my living room to the spare bedroom at the back. I pushed the reinforced steel door open. The LED strip lights flickered on. The walls displayed thick wedges of dark gray acoustic foam. Heavy iron shackles dangled from heavy eye bolts drilled into the floorboards. A metal cot sat in the corner with a thin mattress. The air smelled of cold metal and bleach. The man walked inside. He placed his hands on his hips. He surveyed the soundproofing. He nudged one of the iron chains with the toe of his sneaker. He nodded slowly. I gripped the edge of the heavy door. I slammed it shut. The thick steel resonated with a heavy thud. I engaged the heavy deadbolt. The lock clicked into place with a satisfying final snap. I smiled under my mask. I pictured his sudden realization. I fantasized about his despair. I imagined his dull, bored eyes finally widening in terror as he realized his fatal mistake. A click sounded behind my right ear. I spun around. The man stood in my hallway. He held a bent bobby pin in his left hand. He tossed the bobby pin onto my hallway table. The cylinder on that deadbolt uses a standard 5-pin tumbler system, he said. He brushed his hands together. You need high-security spool pins if you want to keep anyone with basic lockpicking skills inside. Also, the ventilation duct is wide enough for a person to crawl through. I will be renting the dungeon from now on. My jaw dropped. Renting? Renting it? Genki and Kaoru have absolutely no idea who I am, he stated. He walked toward my kitchen. He opened my refrigerator and peered inside. I never agreed to watch their apartment. I broke in yesterday. Moving in with you is significantly more convenient. You have a better refrigerator. I require shelf space for my meal prep. I roared. I lunged at him. I thrust the chef's knife toward his chest. He moved with terrifying speed. He sidestepped the blade. He grabbed my right wrist with his left hand. He twisted my arm behind my back. He shoved me forward. My face slammed against the drywall. He pressed his forearm against the back of my neck. He pinned me completely. The pressure on my arm threatened to dislocate my shoulder. I struggled. He held me immovable. His breathing remained perfectly steady. He exerted the exact amount of force needed to neutralize me. A cold realization washed over my anger. This squatter posed a much greater danger than I did. I like my eggs over easy, he whispered directly into my ear. Do you have any soy sauce? We established a tense roommate relationship over the next 10 days. I started calling him Meh. His face provided exactly zero reaction to my threats, my bloody outfits, or my psychotic rants. He responded to everything with a dull, apathetic stare. He started calling me Yandere. He said my obsessive, violent personality fit the archetype perfectly. I hated his presence. I hated his monotone voice. But May possessed exceptional domestic skills. My quality of life skyrocketed. I woke up every morning to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and grilled mackerel. The apartment shone with cleanliness. May scrubbed the bathroom tiles until they gleamed. He vacuumed the carpets twice a week. He organized my chaotic pantry alphabetically. He even washed and pressed my bloody wedding dress, removing the pig's blood with a mixture of hydrogen peroxide and baking soda. The dress now hung pristine and white in my closet. I sat at the kitchen island on a Tuesday afternoon. I ate a perfect bowl of tonkotsu ramen May had prepared from scratch. The pork belly melted on my tongue. The broth held a deep, rich umami flavor. I glared at him across the counter. He sat reading a paperback novel. This ramen is acceptable, I muttered. You drank all the broth yesterday, May replied. He turned a page of his book. I doubled the batch. I am still going to kill you, I said. Please wash your bowl when you finish, he said. He closed his book. He stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the street below. They are back, he announced. I dropped my chopsticks. They clattered against the ceramic bowl. I jumped off the bar stool. I rushed to the window. Genki and Kaoru exited a taxi on the street below. Genki hauled 2 large suitcases onto the sidewalk. Kaoru laughed and hugged his arm. They looked tanned and sickeningly happy. My heart pounded. The familiar obsessive rage flared in my chest. My target returned. My plan revived. I turned toward the knife block on the counter. I pulled out the 10-inch chef's knife. Put that back, Meh ordered. His voice lacked its usual apathy. A sharp edge cut through his tone. They are right next door, I snarled. I marched toward the front door. I am finishing what I started. Meh stepped in my path. He crossed his arms over his chest. Postpone your murder and kidnapping plans. You are acting purely on emotion. Your hot-headedness guarantees a mistake. You have no surveillance on their current state. You have no exit strategy. You are acting like an amateur. His words struck my pride. I tightened my grip on the knife. I am a predator. I do not take orders from a squatter who builds tiny plastic boats. I shoved past him. I threw my front door open. I stomped down the hallway to apartment 4B. I gripped the doorknob. The door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open. I raised my knife. 3 large men in cheap gray suits stood in the living room. They held Glock 19 pistols. They aimed the weapons at Genki and Kaoru. Kaoru sobbed quietly. Genki held his hands in the air. I froze in the doorway. The largest thug turned his head. He looked at me. He looked at my knife. "Grab the crazy girl with the knife," he barked. "No witnesses." A thug lunged at me. I slashed with my knife. He caught my wrist. He twisted my arm. He punched me in the stomach. All the air rushed out of my lungs. I collapsed to my knees. Someone yanked my arms behind my back. Cold metal zip ties bit into my wrists. A rough burlap sack descended over my head. Darkness consumed my vision. Strong hands hauled me to my feet. The thugs shoved me forward. I stumbled over uneven ground. I heard the roar of an engine. Someone pushed me into the back of a van. I landed hard on the ribbed metal floor next to Genki and Kaoru. Kaoru whimpered constantly. Genki whispered reassurances to her. The van drove for 30 minutes. It stopped. The back doors screeched open. The thugs dragged us out. They marched us through a noisy environment. I smelled frying oil, garlic, and stale beer. We walked into a quieter room. The thugs forced us to our knees. Someone ripped the burlap sack off my head. I blinked against harsh fluorescent lights. We knelt in the kitchen of a large restaurant. Stainless steel prep tables surrounded us. A fat man sat in a leather chair in the center of the kitchen. He wore a loud silk shirt. He smoked a thick cigar. The pinky finger on his left hand ended at the middle knuckle. A classic Yakuza boss, Genki, the boss rumbled. He blew a cloud of blue smoke into the air. Kaoru, congratulations on your marriage, and congratulations on your newly formed medical patent company. The pharmaceutical formulas you patented hold immense value. Genki raised his chin. He looked directly at the boss. We will never sell to you. Our medicine is meant to help people, not line the pockets of the criminal underworld. It's a good thing he's handsome, I muttered to myself, because he has zero situational awareness. The boss laughed. A deep grating sound. You misunderstand. I do not wish to buy your company. I want you to give it to me. Sign the transfer documents. Never, Kaoru yelled. Tears streamed down her face. The boss gestured to his men. Put them in the freezer. Give them 1 hour. Let the cold change their minds. If they refuse to sign, let them freeze to death. A thug grabbed the collar of my shirt. Wait, the boss pointed his cigar at me. Who is the girl in the black clothes? She walked in on the grab, boss, the thug answered. The boss shrugged. Throw her in too. The thugs dragged us toward a massive stainless steel door at the back of the kitchen. They yanked the heavy handle. Cold air billowed out in a thick white cloud. They shoved us inside. The heavy door slammed shut. The latch clicked loudly. The walk-in refrigerator measured 20 feet by 20 feet. Massive racks of frozen beef carcasses hung from the ceiling. Boxes of frozen vegetables lined the metal shelves. The temperature readout on the wall displayed -10 degrees Celsius. Genki and Kaoru immediately collapsed into each other's arms. Oh, Genki! Kaoru cried. She buried her face in his chest. I am so scared. We are going to die in here. Genki wrapped his arms tightly around her. He stroked her hair. I will protect you, Kaoru. I swear it. I will keep you warm. I love you too much to let you die. My brave Genki, she sobbed. I watched them. I sat down on a cardboard box labeled Frozen Edamame. I crossed my zip-tied wrists over my chest. I watched their dramatic, tear-soaked exchange. They projected the exact vibe of the main couple in a cheesy romance drama. I felt absolutely nothing but annoyance. The situation possessed an absurd, ridiculous quality. I planned to kidnap Genki and torture Kaoru. Now I sat freezing to death next to them while they acted out a soap opera. My teeth began to chatter. The chill seeped through my clothes. My fingers turned numb. I regretted ignoring Meh. He warned me. My hot-headedness landed me inside a Yakuza meat locker. 50 minutes passed. The cold penetrated my bones. Kaoru stopped crying. She shivered violently in Genki's arms. Genki's lips turned blue. My eyelids grew heavy. A thunderous noise shook the steel walls. The entire freezer violently vibrated. A horrific screech of tearing metal assaulted my ears. The massive refrigerator door blasted outward. It ripped right off its hinges. The heavy steel slab flew across the kitchen and smashed into a prep table. I stared through the open doorway. The massive grill and crushed hood of a white 18-wheeler truck occupied the center of the restaurant kitchen. The truck had smashed straight through the exterior wall of the building. Bricks, plaster, and shattered glass covered the floor. The Yakuza boss lay pinned beneath the truck's front left tire, completely dead. The surviving thugs scrambled over the rubble and sprinted away into the night. Genki and Kaoru stared in shock. I stood up from my box of edamame. My legs shook from the cold. I stepped out of the freezer. I walked past the mangled truck. I walked out through the gaping hole in the restaurant wall. I walked home. I opened the door to apartment 4A. Warm air brushed against my freezing face. Meh sat at the dining table. He set down 4 white styrofoam takeout boxes. He opened them. Steam rose from the food. I smelled garlic fried rice, gyoza, and sweet and sour pork. I looked closely at the plastic bag resting on the table next to the boxes. The red printed logo read, Dragon Palace Yakuza Dining. I looked at Meh. He held a pair of wooden chopsticks. He looked back at me with his usual flat, unbothered expression. He drove the truck. He found the restaurant, stole an 18-wheeler, and crashed it through a brick wall to get me out of the freezer. Exhaustion settled heavy in my muscles. I possessed absolutely zero energy to argue, question, or threaten him. I walked to the table. I pulled out a chair. I sat down next to him. He pushed a box of garlic fried rice toward me. He handed me a pair of chopsticks. We ate in total silence. The food tasted incredible. Our strange roommate situation continued for 3 more weeks. Meh built his models. He cooked the meals. He cleaned the floors. I plotted my revenge against Kaoru and Genki. I sat in my bedroom and sharpened my knives. The tension shifted. A bizarre comfort settled between us. I sat on the couch watching television on a Thursday evening. Meh stood at the stove frying chicken. A loud clatter echoed from the kitchen. The frying pan hit the floor. Hot oil splashed across the linoleum. I jumped off the couch. I ran to the kitchen. Meh lay curled on the floor. He gripped his lower right abdomen. His face lacked its usual apathy. Pain twisted his features. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He gasped for air. Meh! I dropped to my knees beside him. I grabbed his shoulder. His skin felt burning hot. He groaned. He squeezed his eyes shut. Panic seized my chest. The feeling shocked me. I intended to murder people. I operated a dungeon. I felt no empathy. But seeing Meh writhing on the floor sent a cold spike of genuine fear straight through my heart. I wrapped his arm over my shoulders. I hauled him to his feet. He stumbled heavily against me. I dragged him out the front door. I dragged him down the hallway. I kicked the stairwell door open. We descended 3 flights of stairs to the street. I hailed a taxi. I shoved him into the back seat. I barked the address of the nearest hospital to the driver. We rushed through the sliding glass doors of the emergency room. I yelled for a doctor. 2 nurses rushed forward with a wheelchair. They loaded Meh into the chair. They wheeled him through double doors. I followed closely behind. A doctor stepped out of a nearby room. She wore green surgical scrubs. She held a clipboard. I stopped dead in my tracks. Kaoru? Kaoru looked at me. She looked at Meh in the wheelchair. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. You are our neighbor, from apartment 4A, and you are the girl from the restaurant. I nodded stiffly. My throat felt completely dry. Kaoru immediately shifted her focus to Meh. She placed her hand on his forehead. She pressed her fingers gently against his lower right abdomen. Meh let out a sharp cry of pain. Rebound tenderness, Kaoru said. Her voice carried a sharp, professional authority. The crying, helpless girl from the freezer vanished completely. This woman commanded the room. Classic McBurney's point presentation. High fever. We are dealing with acute appendicitis. He needs surgery immediately before it ruptures. She looked at the nurses. Prep OR3. Get an IV started. Administer broad-spectrum antibiotics and push morphine for the pain. I will perform the appendectomy myself. The nurses rushed May down the hallway. Kaoru gave me a firm nod. She followed them. I sat in the plastic chairs of the waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My emotions spun in a chaotic blender. I sat here relying entirely on the woman I planned to butcher. Kaoru held Me's life in her hands. She possessed the skill to save him. If I had succeeded in my original plan, Kaoru would be dead, and May would be dying right now in my apartment. I felt a sickening, heavy weight in my stomach. Gratitude. I felt indebted to Kaoru. I despised the feeling. At the same time, the sharp panic I felt when May collapsed revealed a horrifying truth. I cared about the squatter. I cared about May. My Yandere obsession fractured. 2 hours later, Kaoru walked into the waiting room. She pulled off her surgical cap. She offered a tired smile. The surgery was a complete success, Kaoru said. We caught it just in time. His appendix was severely inflamed but intact. He will need to rest for a few weeks, but he will make a full recovery. He is sleeping in recovery room 4. Thank you. I forced the words out of my throat. They tasted like ash. May recovered in my apartment. I cooked the meals. I prepared mild rice porridge and miso soup. I brought him his medication. He sat on the couch and built his miniature models. A sharp knock sounded on the front door exactly 1 week after the surgery. I opened the door. A woman stood in the hallway. She looked 50 years old. She wore a tailored white Chanel suit. A string of massive pearls rested against her collarbone. Her hair sat in a perfect rigid bob. 2 massive men in black suits stood behind her. I am Haruka Nakamura, the woman announced. Her voice carried the cold, sharp edge of old money and immense arrogance. Kaoru is my daughter. I stared at her. Come in. She stepped into the living room. Her bodyguards remained in the hallway. She looked at the cheap furniture with overt disgust. She looked at Meh sitting on the couch in his pajamas. I will make this brief, Haruka Nakamura said. She opened her white leather purse. She pulled out a thick manila envelope. She tossed it onto the coffee table. The flap popped open. Stacks of 10,000 yen bills spilled out. I plan to marry Kaoru to a wealthy tech investor, Haruka explained. She paced the room. She ruined my plans. She fell in love with that worthless peasant, Genki. I disowned her. Now, their medical patent company threatens the market share of my own pharmaceutical investments. I want them ruined. I crossed my arms. What does this have to do with us? You live next door, Haruka said. I want you to spy on them, document their movements, find weaknesses, sabotage their deliveries, destroy their professional reputation. You will help me corrode their successful entrepreneurship. Meh picked up a plastic tank tread with his tweezers. He applied a drop of glue. He did not look up. I am giving you 3 days to think it over, Haruka said. She turned toward the door. Do not disappoint me. She walked out. I stared at the money on the table. My conflict deepened. Helping Haruka aligned perfectly with my original goal to destroy Kaoru's happiness. But I owed Kaoru. She saved Meh's life. 3 days passed. We gave Haruka no answer. Haruka resorted to intimidation. I found the tires on my car slashed. Meh patched them with a vulcanizing kit. 2 men followed me to the grocery store. I led them into an alley and broke their kneecaps with a metal pipe. Someone threw a brick through our living room window. Meh taped a piece of cardboard over the hole. We found her attempts entirely laughable. Genki and Kaoru suffered a different fate. Haruka possessed immense corporate power. She targeted their business. Suppliers suddenly cancelled their contracts. Investors pulled their funding. Haruka filed frivolous lawsuits to drain their legal funds. I watched Genki and Kaoru from the window. They walked with slumped shoulders. Dark circles bruised the skin under their eyes. Genki looked exhausted. Kaoru looked completely defeated. Haruka's sabotage successfully corroded their mental and physical well-being. Meh stood next to me at the window. He watched them walk into the building. He turned away from the glass. He walked to the couch. He sat down. He unbuttoned his pajama shirt. He pulled the fabric down, exposing his left shoulder. A massive, jagged burn scar covered his skin. "My real name is Ryu Maeda," Mei stated. His flat, monotone voice carried a new, heavy weight. I walked to the couch. I sat beside him. My father was a wealthy corporate chairman. He possessed immense power. My mother worked as his maid. I was the bastard son, Ryu explained. He stared at the blank wall opposite the couch. My father kept me a secret, but he recognized my specific talents. He trained me as an enforcer. The underworld called me the stagehand. The stagehand, I repeated. I specialized in staging accidents for my father's enemies, Ryu said. Truck crashes, gas leaks, electrical fires. I set the stage perfectly. I removed problems without leaving a trace. He traced the edge of his burn scar with his index finger. My father's legitimate son grew jealous of my usefulness. He decided to eliminate the bastard branch of the family. He locked my mother in her quarters. He set the house on fire. I broke through the burning door. I pulled her out. She died of smoke inhalation in my arms. The fire scarred my shoulder. I stared at the twisted flesh. I burned the entire family mansion to the ground the next night, Ryu said. I locked the legitimate son inside. Then I walked away. I became a drifter. I moved from place to place. I abandoned the stagehand. I focused entirely on building miniature models. He turned his head. He looked directly into my eyes. The apathy vanished entirely. A cold, terrifying fire burned in his pupils. Haruka Nakamura utilizes the exact same tactics my family used. She destroys people for power. She crushes the weak. I prefer to call you Meh, I said quietly. Ryu nodded. I like that name too. Way more. What do we do? I asked. I want to help them. Kaoru and Genki, Meh stated. He stood up from the couch. I want to eliminate Haruka Nakamura. And I'd love it if you'd join me. We spent the next 2 days preparing our attack. Meh transformed the spare bedroom. He pushed the dungeon equipment against the walls. He set up a large sewing machine on the metal cot. He purchased rolls of expensive black silk, glittering sequins, and yards of black tulle. I stood in the center of the room. Mei knelt on the floor with a mouthful of straight pins. He pinned the hem of the fabric around my legs. He worked with terrifying speed and precision. The sewing machine hummed late into the night. He handed me a large box on the third evening. I opened it. I pulled out a stunning, glittering black cocktail dress. The fabric hugged my waist and flared at the hips. Thousands of tiny black sequins caught the light. He included a new mask. He discarded the heavy ceramic kabuki mask. He forged a new mask from lightweight brushed aluminum. It covered the top half of my face, featuring elegant, sharp angles. I put the outfit on. I strapped my combat boots to my feet. I walked to the full-length mirror leaning against the wall. I stared at my reflection. The dress projected power, elegance, and pure danger. The metallic mask caught the overhead light with a menacing glint. Is this outfit too much? I asked. I turned to the side, checking the fit. Meh stood in the doorway. He wore a sharp black suit and a black tie. I am the stagehand, Meh said. He adjusted his cuffs. I stay in the shadows. I set the pieces in motion. You are the star. The star needs to look the part. The underground parking garage beneath Haruka Nakamura's corporate headquarters smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. I crouched behind a concrete pillar. I watched the private elevator doors slide open. Haruka Nakamura stepped out. She wore a sharp black pantsuit. Her 2 massive bodyguards flanked her. They walked toward a long, black Rolls-Royce Phantom parked in the VIP section. A bodyguard opened the rear door. Haruka slid into the back seat. The bodyguard closed the door. The 2 men walked to the front of the vehicle. They climbed into the driver and passenger seats, or rather, that's what she assumed had happened. The engine purred to life. I stepped out from behind the pillar. I moved silently in my combat boots. I reached the rear door of the Rolls-Royce just as the vehicle began to roll forward. I pulled the handle. The door opened. I slipped inside. I pulled the door shut with a soft click. Haruka sat on the plush leather seat. She tapped on her smartphone. I sat directly beside her. The glittering black sequins of my dress rubbed against the leather upholstery. Haruka sensed my presence. She turned her head. She saw the metallic mask. She saw the black dress. She opened her mouth to scream. I whipped my arm out. I pressed the cold steel blade of my chef's knife directly against her throat. The sharp edge indented her skin.
"Make a sound and I sever your vocal cords,"
I whispered, my voice distorted thanks to a hidden device in the mask. Haruka froze. Her eyes bulged. She nodded slowly. I reached into my black clutch purse. I pulled out a sleek silver laptop. I rested it on my lap. I flipped the screen open. I tapped the keyboard.
"Look at the screen, Haruka."
I ordered. Haruka shifted her eyes downward. The screen played a live, high-definition video feed. The camera angle showed the interior of Haruka's executive office on the top floor of the building we just left. The heavy mahogany doors of the office burst open. A dozen police officers in tactical gear swarmed into the room. They shouted orders. 2 detectives in suits followed them. The camera angle shifted. It zoomed in on the massive projector screen taking up the back wall of the office. The projector displayed clear, high-resolution images of banking documents, offshore account numbers, and email transcripts. The documents clearly detailed Haruka's illegal stock manipulation, her bribery of public officials, and her direct orders to sabotage Genki and Kaoru's company. "Who did this?" Haruka hissed. Sweat dripped down her neck. "Who gave them those files?"
"I did.
I replied.
With a little help of the stagehand. We bypassed your network security 2 days ago. We compiled every single piece of dirt you own. We set the projector to display the evidence the exact moment the police breached the door. We sent an anonymous tip to the Financial Crimes Division."
The limousine drove up the concrete ramp. It exited the garage. It turned onto the busy city street. The screen showed the detectives seizing Haruka's personal computer. They bagged her files.
"You are ruined,"
I said.
"Your company is dead. Your reputation is ash. You face 20 years in federal prison."
The limousine approached the massive iron gates of Haruka's private estate. The gates stood wide open. A chaotic sea of flashing lights illuminated the driveway. 5 news vans parked haphazardly on the lawn. Dozens of reporters and cameramen swarmed the driveway. Meh tipped off the press. The limousine stopped in front of the massive front doors of the mansion. The driver threw the car into park.
"Get out."
I removed the knife from her throat. Haruka trembled violently. Her arrogance completely vanished. She looked like a terrified, trapped animal. She reached for the door handle. She pulled it open. She stepped out of the vehicle. When she looked back, I was gone. The driver's seat was empty, and her security detail was nowhere to be seen. The press immediately swarmed her. Microphones thrust into her face. Camera flashes exploded like strobe lights. "Miss Nakamura! Are the allegations of corporate sabotage true?" "Miss Nakamura, the police are currently raiding your headquarters. Care to comment on the leaked bribery documents?" Haruka held her hands up to shield her face. "I have no comment. Get off my property. This is a misunderstanding. I will explain everything." From my hiding place, I watched her attempt to save face. I reached into my clutch. I pulled out a small black remote control. Meh handed it to me before we left the apartment. It featured a single red button. I pressed the button. A massive explosion ripped through the night air. The shockwave rattled the heavy bulletproof glass of the limousine. The entire 3rd floor of Haruka's mansion violently detonated. Orange flames blew outward, shattering the massive bay windows. A deafening boom echoed across the estate. Plumes of thick black smoke billowed into the night sky. The reporters screamed. They ducked for cover. The police drew their weapons, aiming blindly at the burning house. Haruka Nakamura fell to her knees on the pavement. She stared up at the burning wreckage of her home. The fire illuminated her terrified, stunned face. The stagehand destroyed her empire, exposed her crimes, and burned her sanctuary to the ground in a single, coordinated strike. I slipped out into the darkness, walked away from the chaos. The star finished her performance. We stood on the platform of the Tokyo train station. The morning sun cast long, golden shadows across the concrete. The air smelled of morning dew and hot coffee. Genki and Kaoru stood before us. They held 3 large suitcases. They looked rested. They looked healthy. The dark circles under their eyes disappeared entirely. Haruka's assets remained frozen. The police held her in custody without bail. The legal attacks against the medical patent company evaporated. The business immediately secured massive funding from an ethical investment firm. "We are moving to Kyoto," Genki said. He smiled brightly. "We are opening our new research facility there. It is a fresh start." Kaoru stepped forward. She grabbed my hands. She squeezed them tightly. "Thank you, both of you. The police told us about the anonymous tip. We know it was you. You saved our company. You saved our lives." I looked at the woman I originally planned to murder. I felt absolutely no desire to hurt her. I felt genuine satisfaction at her success. "Take care of yourselves," I said. Genki bowed deeply to me. Kaoru bowed to me. They turned and dragged their suitcases onto the bullet train. The doors slid shut. The train silently accelerated out of the station. I stood on the platform. The platform emptied. I felt a warm hand enclose mine. I looked down. Meh intertwined his fingers with my fingers. I looked up at his face. He wore his gray sweatpants and his faded black t-shirt. His eyes held their usual, lazy droop. "I need to buy more Tamiya cement on the way home," Meh stated in his flat, monotone voice. "I ran out while building a panzer tank." I squeezed his hand. I smiled. "I will cook tonkotsu ramen for dinner." "Make extra broth," Meh said. We turned and walked out of the station together. The end.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.